There's an incredible story of extraordinary courage in World War II that was hidden for 46 years behind the wall of secrecy in the Soviet Union. In this podcast, I want to share how for 3 long years, from 1941 to 1944, the friendship and collaboration between a rabbi and an Orthodox bishop saved all the Jews of Bulgaria from the Nazi death camps. It's a story that will certainly challenge all of us. Welcome to Israel Unveiled. I'm really glad you could join with me today. This podcast is a bit of history, and I think that you're going to find it as interesting as I did. In early 1941, Bulgaria, a nation in Eastern Europe, joined Germany's axis of evil. And 3 years later, in September of 1944, the Soviet army entered Bulgaria, and that nation remained under Russian control until World War II ended 6 months later in June of 1945. The following year, the Communist Party of Bulgaria took control of the country. And though not a part of the Soviet Union, it remained a staunch ally of Russia. They were dependent on the Soviets politically, economically, and militarily for the next 44 years. And finally, in 1989, in a coup, a reform-minded government came to power, and new elections were held in Bulgaria 6 months later. And it ushered in a new era of openness that came to the nation, and with it, an incredible story that had been hidden for 46 years came to light. It revealed the incredible collaborative efforts of 11 brave bishops of Bulgaria that were led by Metropolitan Stefan and a Bulgarian chief rabbi, Daniel Zion, that saved Bulgaria's 50,000 Jewish citizens destined for the Nazi death camps and sure extermination in World War II. And I'm really excited to tell that story. And also the story that's within that story of the amazing personal spiritual journey of Rabbi Daniel Zion, one that absolutely needs to be heard. Daniel Zion, or Daniel Zion, was born in 1883 to a loving and a very deeply religious, observant family, led by his father, a Torah scholar and a rabbi. He received an excellent education. He was fluent in many languages, and he completed a theological degree. And in 1916, Daniel, at 33 years of age, became a rabbi with a congregation in Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria. And there he showed his great heart for the poor and for the helpless as he served the Jewish community faithfully. In 1931, he became head of the Supreme Rabbinical Court of Bulgaria. And as chief rabbi of Bulgaria Jewry, he had enormous authority. Stoyan Sokov, a man who would cross paths with Rabbi Zion one day, was born in 1878, and he was a brilliant seminary student. And he joined the military after he completed his seminary studies. In 1910, he joined the Bulgarian Orthodox Church, and he became a priest. And he was given the name Stefan as his name, and he was greatly loved, and he was admired both for his brilliance and for his kindness. And in 1922, he was elected as Metropolitan. That was a name that refer to the title of bishop. He was elected as Metropolitan of Sofia, joining 10 other bishops of the Church of Bulgaria. And it was said that he was highly respected amongst his colleagues. Destiny would bring these two spiritual leaders together during a time of great darkness in the nation in Bulgaria. I want to share a bit of the history so that you can understand better the times in which they served together. After World War I and the 1919 peace treaty, defeated Bulgaria saw the strategic regions of Thrace, southwest Bulgaria, with its access to the Aegean Sea, and parts of Macedonia that were taken from them. And so toward the end of the 1930s, with the rise of the Nazi Party, King Boris III of Bulgaria, he saw an opportunity to recover and place those areas back under his control. He had hoped to remain neutral in World War II, but realized that wasn't a possibility. So he joined Germany's Axis. Alexander Belev, a well-known lawyer and an ardent anti-Semite, was then appointed by Hitler to be the Bulgarian Commissioner of Jewish Affairs, and he was dedicated to the annihilation of the Jews. Working with the Minister of the Interior, a bill called the Bill for the Defense of the Nation was then presented to Parliament. It was primarily aimed at the Jewish population, and immediately the Bulgarian Orthodox Church, led by Metropolitan Stefan, rose up to defend the Jewish population. And together the bishops of Bulgaria courageously protested. They wrote and they presented a response, hoping to defeat that bill. It was signed by all of those in the Synod of Bulgaria, and they left no doubt that the church in Bulgaria stood together in support of the Jewish people. The Jewish people were actually less than 1% of Bulgaria's population. So this was a very bold and a very brave move that these church leaders led. And at that meeting, it was unanimously decided by them that saving the Jews was a priority. And in light of that, they even went so far as to offer fake baptisms to Jews who would request it. Sadly, that bill passed Parliament, and it was signed by Tsar Boris III. In January of 1941, the government-owned paper published the bill, and it became law. Jews were now recognized as enemies of the people and a threat to Bulgaria. They were forbidden to be on the streets between 9 at night and 6 in the morning. All Jews were required to register and declare all their property, and they couldn't vote. They could not serve in government any longer. Jewish businesses closed. Doctors and lawyers, pharmacists, teachers were now unemployed, and the list went on and on and on. The intent was to isolate the Jewish people from the life in Bulgaria, and it began in earnest. In May, as King Boris III was under increased pressure to deal with the Jewish problem, the government told all the Jewish men ages 20 to 40 to report to work in labor camps. And he saw this as a way to prevent them from being sent to the death camps. He pleaded with Germany that the men were needed to maintain the roads and other services for the nation. And the church, meanwhile, continued to urge the king to do what he could to save the Jewish people. The next year, in 1942, a conference was held in Wannsee, Germany. And it was convened by the Nazi head of security, Reinhard Heydrich. At that meeting, the plan for the annihilation of European Jews was finalized. Bulgaria, by name, was included in that written plan. Alexander Belev, the anti-Semitic lawyer who was appointed Commissioner of Jewish Affairs, he left Berlin and he returned to Bulgaria set to enact the eradication of the Jewish people. And the first to be targeted were the 12,000 Jews who were living in that annexed area of Thrace and Macedonia. They were targeted because they were seen as not actual citizens of Bulgaria, but as people of an annexed territory. In the middle of the night, with no warning, they were arrested and they were deported to death camps. And they died in Treblinka. The order also called for Jews that were living along the border. But Deputy President of the Parliament, after seeing the horror of the law that he had voted for, regretted his actions. And so he gathered others in Parliament to personally make a plea to the king. And they, along with Bishop Stefan, were able to stop the further transports. But the fight to save the Jews of Bulgaria was not over. At the same time, Rabbi Daniel was actively at work comforting the Jews while meeting and consulting with Bishop Stefan. King Boris was called to Hitler's Eagle's Nest to meet with the Fuhrer. There, Hitler made it absolutely clear. Boris had tried to make the case that the Jews were needed in the war effort. At the same time, Stefan continued to strengthen the unity in the church to stand against increased measures against the Jews. And in 1943, it would be the worst of the war years for Bulgaria. A new order came, a secret plan to begin with the Jews of Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria. This was leaked to the Jewish leaders. And Chief Rabbi Daniel Zion led a delegation of Jews to intercede with German officials. There were those in the Jewish community who actually didn't support him. They were fearful of the retribution that they felt would surely come from the authorities. But Rabbi Daniel would not be thwarted. German authorities refused to see him. He then pushed for an audience with King Boris, but was unsuccessful. He then appealed to Metropolitan Stefan, who immediately sent messages to the king asking for his intervention, boldly reminding the king that God was watching. The king refused to sign the deportation orders, thankfully, and it stopped the trains literally from leaving the station. 2 more times King Boris was summoned by Hitler. But in the darkest hours, Metropolitan Stefan and the Bulgarian Church, Rabbi Zion and the Jews stood together. After the last meeting with Hitler in August of 1943, suddenly 2 weeks later, King Boris III, under what is described as mysterious circumstances, died. There were many who believed that he was poisoned. He had angered the Nazis. 3 attempts to deport the Jews of Bulgaria failed. And while Rabbi Zion rallied the Jews who prayed and fasted, Metropolitan Stefan and all the bishops remained unified in supporting their Jewish brethren. The 50,000 Jews of Bulgaria survived. The one nation in all of occupied Europe to save its Jewish population. And the story stands as an incredible testimony of brotherhood. For his courageous leadership in 2001, Yad Vashem recognized Metropolitan Stefan as a righteous among the nations for his courageous actions in saving the Jews of Bulgaria. His name is engraved on the walls of the Garden of the Righteous among the nations at the Holocaust Memorial, Yad Vashem, in Jerusalem. At the start of this podcast, I mentioned that there was an amazing story within a story that I wanted to share. And it's drawn from a wonderful book by Avi Mizrahi titled Legacy of Hope. His family was part of those 50,000 Jews saved. You can hear the rest of the story in part 2 of this podcast, and I hope you will join me. You won't be disappointed. So if you've enjoyed this podcast and found it interesting, I hope you'll push like, and then also that you would consider subscribing to the podcast, Israel Unveiled. Thanks so much for joining me. Blessings and shalom.